Good morning, ladies. Today we're going to take a step away from nonfiction and we're going to work with a little fiction story today. So our learning target is I can compare and contrast within a story supporting my claims with text evidence. So the name of our passage today is Weekend at Sawyer Farm. And again, there is an electronic version of this on ReadWorks. So we're going to do our first read together. Okay. It took Laura 3 long hours to drive from New York City to Sawyer Farm. There had been lots of traffic all along the way. As she finally pulled up to the winding dirt driveway that led to the farmhouse, she suddenly felt weary and exhausted. Her silver sports car jumped and jolted along the bumpy path as she got to the front door. Susie and Will heard the sound from the car engine and came outside to welcome Laura. They had owned Sawyer Farm and used the land to raise their own animals and crops. They knew Laura from long before when they were all in college together. "Great to see you after so long," Susie said, kissing Laura on the cheek. From the open door of the farmhouse wafted the delicious aroma of freshly baked bread. "Great to see you too," said Laura. "But you sure I didn't come at the wrong time of year? I've heard winter is not the best time to visit a farm." Laura lived in New York City and worked as a lawyer. This was the first time she had been to the country in a long time. She was a bit nervous. "Not at all," said Susie. "Winter is a great time to be here." "There's still lots to do on a farm in the winter," added Will. "We have to keep our animals fed and warm. You can come to me to feed the cows and chickens tomorrow if you want. It's fun." "Sounds good," said Laura. Susie and Will invited Laura inside and showed her to her room. It had a high antique bed and its very own fireplace. Will lit the logs with some kindling and matches, and soon a great fire crackled away. Susie and Will left Laura to settle in for a few minutes. She turned her smartphone off, washed her face, and let her feet warm by the fire. Her headache was already getting better. It was about time for dinner when Laura went downstairs. Susie was busy stirring a giant pot of beef stew. A bowl of creamy mashed potatoes with a big tray of roasted vegetables lay out on the table. Susie explained to Laura that the roasted vegetables were a mix of butternut squash, turnips, and parsnips. They were all winter vegetables, she said, because they grow underneath the soil, protected from the snow and cold weather. Laura helped Susie set the plates, forks, and knives. It started to snow outside, and soon the hills and fields out of the window seemed to be coated with a thin layer of powdered sugar. It was so peaceful and quiet in the country compared to the hectic, fast-paced New York City. At last Susie finished stirring the stew and brought it to the table. Then she took the steaming loaf of bread out of the oven. They all sat down to eat. "Wow," said Laura as she tasted her first spoonful of stew. "I have been craving a hearty meal like this all day." "Of course," said Will. "In winter, when it's very cold, all animals, including human beings, need to eat big, warm meals." "That's right," said Susie. "Our body temperature always has to be around 98.6, even when it's only 20 degrees outside. To keep our body temperature up, we need that extra fuel in the wintertime. That's why I make big meals when it's cold and snowy." Laura never thought much about eating differently in the winter and summer. Her job kept her too busy to think about food. Often she got home late from work and only had the energy to heat up a small can of soup. "You know, Sue," said Laura, "I think I need to learn more about cooking good food. It's embarrassing to admit, but I can barely make an omelet. I'm so busy with work that I don't have time to experiment in the kitchen." "Well, why don't you come and stay with us one weekend every month?" said Sue. "I can show you how to cook some really quick and easy meals that will keep you full in wintertime. You won't be so tired all the time." "I would love that," said Laura. Soon Laura was stuffed with fresh bread, stew, potatoes, and vegetables. She felt relaxed and happy. The friends sat together in the living room for a while after dinner, drinking hot chocolate and listening to music. Outside the window, the snow kept falling. That night, Laura slept like a baby. When she woke up the next day, the hills and fields were covered in a thick blanket of fluffy white snow. She ate a big bowl of oatmeal and raisins for breakfast. Then she put on her winter coat and snow boots. She felt peppy and full of life as she walked outside with Will to do the chores. First, she helped him untie big batches of hay and feed them to the horses. Next, she and Will patched up a hole in the barn where the snow had drifted in. The sheep had all clustered together in one side of the barn, away from the snowdrift. "They really hate the cold," Will explained. In the afternoon, Laura stayed inside with Susie. She helped her water all of her indoor plants. It's amazing that these plants need mostly just water and air to survive, while we need to eat big meals with different kinds of vegetables and fruit. "Yes," said Susie. In that way, plants are a lot simpler than we are. The rest of the weekend flew by, and the friends had such fun having a snowball fight with each other the next day that Laura did not really want to leave, but she had to go to work the next day. As she drove away in her sports car, waving goodbye to Susie and Will, she thought how lucky she was to have such good friends. She felt in her pocket the stew recipe Susie had written down for her and looked forward to trying it out at home. All right, so again, all of these questions are on ReadWorks, but there's just one that I added in, a little personal connection here that you can identify. So we're going to read all of our questions first, but this one's a little extra. That's why there's a little extra more lines. So after reading the passage, where would you rather live? A city or a farm, and why? So again, opinion question. This is all about you, not any of the characters. That's why it's kind of separate from the other questions. But let's take a look at the other questions. Again, all of these can be submitted electronically on ReadWorks. Number 1, Susie and Will owned Sawyer Farm. What did they use their land for? Number 2, what kind of character is Laura in the story? Number 3, read the following sentences from the story. That night, Laura slept like a baby. When she woke the next day, all the hills and fields were covered with a thick blanket of fluffy white snow. She ate a big bowl of oatmeal and raisins for breakfast, and then put on her winter coat and snow boots. She felt peppy and full of life as she walked outside with Will to do the chores. What conclusion is supported about Laura based on this information? So again, we're talking about what conclusion. This is just a claim that can be made, which statement is believed to be true. Number 4, what is the difference between the way Laura eats at home and the way she eats on Sawyer Farm? Number 6, what is the theme of the story? Number 5, what is the theme of the story? Number 6, read the following sentences. Our body temperature has to be around 98.6 degrees, even when it's only 20 degrees outside. To keep our body temperature up, we really need that extra fuel in the wintertime. That's why I make big meals when it's cold and snowy. So here you need to use your context clues to figure out what that word fuel means in the passage. Number 7, little grammar work. Choose the answer that best completes the sentence below. Laura has a good time visiting Sawyer Farm, blank, she has to leave at the end of the weekend. So 8, 9, and 10 are short response questions. Please make sure you are using wrap. Number 8, how does Laura feel after eating dinner with Susie and Will the night she arrives at Sawyer Farm? So again, you got to think about how Laura feels that first day when she gets there, but then it kind of changes at night after dinner. So number 9, what is one difference between the way Laura lives at Sawyer Farm and the way she lives in New York City? So big comparison question, very supportive of our learning target. So please make sure you are supporting your answer with text evidence. And then number 10, kind of an opinion question here, but you definitely need to back it up with text evidence. So do you think Laura likes living in the country better or living in the city more? And explain your evidence from the passage. So again, you still need to make that inference. You need to choose one, but then you are using details from the text to support your answer. All right, so now it's time to close read. Chunk your text. So again, with our fiction passage, you have to kind of just make those natural chunks that you want to. So I'll be showing you mine in a moment, but again, chunking the way that makes sense to you. Circle and attempt to define unknown words. Don't get hung up on this. If you can use your context clues around that word to try to define it, go for it. But if not, just leave it circled. Underline key information. Remember to focus on information that would help to support your answer because you've already previewed your questions. You're summarizing the margin and you're identifying any elements that may be helpful. So with this fictional passage, you know that one of those questions were about theme. Put possible themes up at the top. Work through all of those and do your best to kind of narrow down which one you think fits better. All right, ladies, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some of my close reading marks with you and go over just a couple of the questions. We're really just going to focus on the ones that support the learning target today, but please make sure you're submitting all of your questions so I can give you feedback on your short responses and you can get kind of that automatic feedback for your multiple choice questions. So again, what I did here was I kind of broke apart the learning target so I can compare and contrast. So those are similarities and differences. I recognize those keywords within a story. That means that we're working within the same story. We're not comparing two stories. We're looking at the characters within the first story. So our genre is fiction. A little step away. I thought I should identify that because we've been working with some nonfiction texts. So for the first page here, I just did a whole big chunk for these 4 paragraphs. Things that I identified were took 3 hours to go from New York City to Sawyer Farm, meaning that there is some distance apart there. Her silver sports car, I think that that shows wealth. And then jolting down the path again, I gave us a little synonym for kind of bumped along the path. Um, I put a little note off into the margin that Susie, Will, and Laura are all old friends. They own a farm and they used to raise their own crops. This is also underlined because gives us one of our answers to one of our very first multiple choice questions. Aroma means scent. I use my contact clues to figure that out. Connection with the freshly baked bread. Um, I underline these parts because it kind of shows how she's feeling at the beginning. So Laura had always heard that it was not the best time to visit the farm in the winter. She had lived in New York City and worked as a lawyer, and she was a bit nervous. So my summary notes over here for the margin, I have quite a few of them. I said Laura goes to visit Susie and Will at their farm. Laura wonders if winter is the right time to visit, and she's a bit nervous because she is out of her element. Okay, I'm talking about her being out of her element because she's a city girl. She's a big hotshot lawyer, and now she is coming to spend some time in the country, and she feels very nervous. Okay, so moving on to the next page, take a look how I chunked here. I did 3 large chunks on this page. Again, chunk however you wish, whatever makes sense to you. Um, so here at the top, I have farm winter responsibilities for the farm, and then I defined antique and kindling here. And then the notes that I put in the margin is that Laura is adapting to her environment. I underlined that she turned her smartphone off, washed her face, and let her feet warm by the fire, and her headache was already getting better. This is showing that she's already having these different feelings, okay? Very, very important because we are really evaluating how she feels and those similarities and differences to her home and this home at the farm. So I also do a little note off to the side here about this comparing to New York City. It was so peaceful and quiet in the country compared to the hectic, fast-paced New York City. So hectic is kind of a negative word, right? She doesn't say exciting. Fast-paced, pretty neutral, but hectic gives me more of kind of a negative connotation. So her saying that it's so peaceful and quiet in the city, I mean in the country, is kind of showing maybe that she has maybe some negative feelings towards the city. So dinner time with fresh vegetables. This is when she's talking about her big hearty meal. So let's scooch down a little bit here. This is kind of a fun part too because we kind of hear about the difference between those eating habits that Laura has as compared to Susie and Will, talking about that importance for those big meals in the winter, talking about those winter vegetables. And then they're comparing Laura's eating habits down here. This is when they reference that she only really has time to have a maybe heat up a small can of soup after a hectic workday. Alrighty, so last little page here. Susie offers to help Laura to come stay 1 weekend a month to learn how to cook. She does accept it, which I think that was great. So if she says, I would love that, that's her accepting that and saying that she is going to. And then it's also kind of getting into those positive feelings that Laura is having, right? She's feeling relaxed and happy. She would love that. These are all very positive emotions and words for this character to kind of show that difference in her. She slept like a baby, right? So that means she's sleeping very well. She felt peppy and full of life as she walked outside to help Will with the chores. So again, these feelings about kind of being there in winter are changing for her. She helps out with the farm chores. She's even excited about it. And then she helps out Susie with her indoor chores, watering those plants. And they kind of have that connection to the plants about how simple that life is, that simpler life, maybe even in the city. And then kind of to end out here, the rest of the weekend flew by, meaning that it went very quickly, that she was having fun. You know, it says here that she didn't really want to go, very different than when she arrived, right? How nervous she was to, let alone be in the country, but then also she questioned what they were going to do in the winter. And then she kind of makes that connection, that appreciation for her friends. She thought about how lucky she was to have great friends. Um, and that she's lucky to also have this experience. So I'm going to share just a couple of my questions again. You are not copying Miss Egging's questions. You are comparing them to your own. You're evaluating your details, making sure they're supporting what you want to say. This is a great chance to kind of check those over, make any changes that you need. So again, this first kind of opinion question after reading the passage, where would you rather live, the city or a farm and why? So I'll just share mine. Again, no right or wrong answer for this. I said, although I see the perks of living in the city as well as a farm, I would choose to live on a farm. Only if I had help because of how busy it is. Um, I love the feelings of peace and connection to nature while being on a farm. I love animals and especially love riding horses. I think it's an awesome I think it's awesome that Susie can cook meals right from her own garden. I think living on a farm is a healthy lifestyle. But again, you may feel completely differently and you just need to back that up. So I'm going to kind of breeze through these. Um, I want to talk about question number 4, though. I really want to isolate this. Um, so I box number 4 because it's kind of talking about this is a big comparison question for multiple choice. What is the difference between the way Laura eats at home and the way she eats on Sawyer Farm? So I know that you can see my answers here, but I just want to kind of go through my thought process. So I read through all of my choices and I immediately eliminated C. Laura eats healthy stew at home, but on Sawyer Farm, she only has the energy to heat up a small can of soup. That's completely false, and those details are actually switched. So I eliminated that one right away. And then I also eliminated D. Laura eats with other people at home, but on Sawyer Farm, she eats by herself. Just because, again, that's not true. It's one of those things that is completely flipped. So then going back between A and B, Laura does not think about eating differently in winter and summer on Sawyer Farm, but she does thinking about it at home. B is just not correct. So the correct choice is A. Laura does not pay as much attention to what she eats at home as she does on Sawyer Farm. So also too, I know that you can see kind of the theme down here. And then again, pretty easy life in the country versus life in the city. And again, themes are universal. They can be applied to multiple stories. Please don't confuse it with the main idea, which is unique to each story. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to take a look at 8, 9, and 10. So number 8 says, how does Laura feel after eating dinner with Susie the night she arrives at Sawyer Farm? And even though this isn't a direct comparison question, you have to kind of think about the impact this question has because Laura feels relaxed and happy after eating dinner with Susie and Will. Laura shares that she usually only eats a can of soup for dinner and says that she's been craving a hearty meal all day. So this one is kind of important too because it's significant because at the beginning, Laura is feeling very nervous, but now she's happy. She even is kind of making those comparisons to like, oh my goodness, this is how I used to eat at home and how much better it is here on the farm. So I definitely wanted to circle number 9. One difference between the way Laura lives at Sawyer Farm and the way she lives in New York City. So difference, these are those contrast details. So I want to talk about this because I did a couple different things here that I want to bring to your attention. So my answer is Laura is doing farm work instead of lawyer work in New York City. Laura helped Will feed the horses and patched up barn holes. The texts even say she felt peppy and full of life as she walked outside with Will to do chores, showing that she was actually even excited to do this other work. What I want to point out is though, you could have identified a couple different things. So up here, as you can see, you could have identified eating different meals, how positive she feels versus being tired, and the environment around her. She goes into um, very nice detail describing her setting, and then you can kind of infer with New York City, she's talking about kind of that hectic, chaotic life. But any of those choices would work. Again, you just need to make sure that you're backing up with text evidence. Number 10, does Laura like living in the country or living in the city more? Explain your answer using evidence from the passage. So you can go either way here. You can pick country or city, you just need to back it up. So I'm going to read you my answer, but then I'm also going to give some clues if you decided that she preferred to live in New York City. So I said, I think Laura prefers to live in the country because of her changes in behavior and the words she says. Laura was having so much fun in the last paragraph that it tells us that she didn't want to leave. We also learned that she slept like a baby, showing how comfortable she was there. She was even eager to help with indoor and outdoor chores. So as you can see how I supported here, I paraphrased a couple details, but then I also told you where I got my details from. Okay, and then I also took that direct quote, slept like a baby, right from the text as well. But if you did choose that she preferred New York City, some validation you might have for that is, we know that she's a lawyer making those big lawyer bucks. She gets that fancy sports car. She also never actually says that she prefers the country. We just kind of infer that based on some of her words, but she doesn't actually say that she wants to live there. And then we do learn that she only agrees to come one weekend per month to learn some kind of cooking strategies from Susie. So Again, it could have gone either way here. It's just kind of how you interpret it. But again, you need to make sure that you have at least two details to support. Thank you, ladies.